We take a look at the Carolina Hurricanes, their big offseason moves, and more on this offseason edition of Locked On NHL Game Night.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before, only on Locked On NHL Game Night. Your team every day.
Hey, hockey fans, welcome to Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thanks for making Locked On NHL Game Night your place to get a recap of the night in the NHL during the regular season and the playoffs. We are available wherever you get your podcasts in on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, an LA Kings fan on the West Coast. He is Shukri Wrights, a Boston Bruins fan on the East Coast. Together, we are normally discussing all the goals, saves, big moments, and stories from the night in the NHL. But of course, it's the off season. There are no games to talk about. But we're here to help you get ready for next season. We're going to preview all 32 NHL teams between now and opening night. And before we bring in our next local expert to talk to, Shu, we love talking about games, but also fun to learn about these teams and how they've been going this off season.
Absolutely, especially for a team like Carolina coming off the season that they had and seeing the moves that they've made this offseason so far. It's going to be a lot of fun to be able to dive into it with Zack Martin of the Locked On Hurricanes podcast, and I can't wait to jump into it because we got a lot to talk about.
Well, let us get right into it, and we welcome in Zack Martin. He is your host of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, covering that team every day. Zack, thanks for joining us, and to make you feel welcome, I pulled out my Bunch of Jerks t-shirt for you. Are they still doing that? Is that kind of old school, or are they still the Bunch of Jerks there in Raleigh?
By the way, just real quick, that's for those that don't remember, don't know, that's a reference to the great Don Cherry back in 2019 when they were about to face the Boston Bruins in the conference finals.
Yeah, and Don Cherry wasn't being kind, but I think a lot of people went the other way with it, right, Zack? You guys embraced the Bunch of Jerks. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, no, we definitely did. Now currently it's just more of like they still form a circle around center ice, do the whole, the skull chant, however you want to call it. I know Iceland's done it, the Vikings doing and stuff like that, but not a lot of like, Evander Holyfield coming out and knocking someone out or guys dunking on the hoop and stuff like that. It's more of just whoever had a great night for the team, they kind of just go in, like they go mob him or something like that. Or if it's Halloween, throwing candy out into the crowd and stuff like that. Or if it's like family night or whatever, then might bring their kids out and stuff like that. So there's a couple games here and there where they're doing something other than just, hey, we're gonna go mob the cane of the game or something like that. So it's not of the what we saw early on, but there's still some forms of it. But yeah, it's just a lot of doing the skull chants, doing the clapping at least. So
yeah,
we still have some fun down here.
Yeah, well, it's supposed to be fun. Yeah, it's supposed to be fun. And Don Cherry was upset you guys were celebrating wins after a game. Wasn't the norm then. It's now pretty common now that the teams will get together and raise their stick or whatever. But he called you guys a bunch of jerks, and you guys responded well to it. It was fun. But Zack, I do want to obviously start things off by looking back at this past season. 99 points, second in the Metro for the Canes, fourth best point total in the Eastern Conference. Beat the Devils in 5 in the first round, beat the Capitals in 5 in the second round, but unfortunately lost in 5 in the conference finals to the eventual Stanley Cup champion, Florida Panthers. When you look back to the start of this past season to where the Hurricanes ended up, was it a successful season? Obviously, only one team wins the Cup. We know that. But overall, what was the feel of the expectations and then where you ended up at the end of the year?
It's funny when you look at it because I know a lot of people, around the NHL, and even like if you ask some fans of the area too, it was a lot of, they lost 6 guys. They lost their entire second defensive pairing in Brady Shea and Brett Pesce. Losing Stefan Nason and a few other guys too. You're kind of, and then you got the additions and, you bring in Sean Walker, Shane Gostisbehere, William Carey and stuff like that. You kind of felt like it was more of a transition year for the Hurricanes and stuff like that because the cap didn't really go up and a lot of guys left for a lot bigger contracts that would have put the Hurricanes $20 million over the cap at the time. Of course, if we had this offseason, salary cap last year, totally different conversation, but a lot of people saw this team as they might have a transition. They might, maybe sneak a third place in the Metro, might go for a wild card spot. I know there were some hot takes of they're going to miss it entirely, which, I mean, I don't know why you bet against Brindamour and the Carolina Hurricanes. Now they're 7 for 7 making the playoffs and winning the first round and stuff like that. But then, you start off 14-4, 8-game winning streak, going into, with the North Carolina State Fair trip where they're gone for like 2 weeks. They just outside of losing to the Blues, they just went ruckshot all through, like even Western Canada. They took care of business, winning a lot of overtime games against Vancouver and Edmonton. November, December wasn't really the greatest for the Hurricanes. Definitely a lot of very 500 hockey. January and March were great months for them, winning 10 and 11 games each month. February was kind of a lull. Of course, you're talking a weird, 2 weeks off for the Four Nations face-off. And then, I know a lot of people look at the last few games of the regular season and like, why was their record 3-6? Well, they already clinched and they wanted to keep a lot of their guys healthy. So, and a lot of teams were doing that too at the time. And then you get to the playoffs and, shocked a lot of people by you make it to the Eastern Conference Final for the third time in 7 years, 2 times, excuse me, 2 times in the last 3, and at least winning an Eastern Conference Final game. So, I mean, at least you broke that streak on top of that too.
Yeah.
It was definitely, I think it exceeded a lot of expectations. And I know it wasn't really the Eastern Conference Final a lot of people thought it was going to be like, because I thought at least be 6 or 7. But, I mean, when you got a team like Florida doing what they did, I mean, at least you got a win out of it. So at least there's a silver lining if we want to go there. But I think overall, I'm very happy how they did on a season where it was a transition. You do that in a transition year and you see what they did in the offseason. You took a really good team and just made them better, especially after what you saw last year.
When I look back on the 2024-2025 season, there's obviously a lot of directions where you can go in terms of like looking at the season in review. But I'm a person that loves talking about certain moments and certain periods during the season that impacts the bigger picture of the entire season. And for me, I can't talk about the 2024-2025 Carolina Hurricanes without talking about that 2-month stretch between January until March when they had Mikko Rantanen. They acquired him in that monster trade with the Colorado Avalanche. And in Carolina, there was a lot of conversation that was spilling out to the national media in regards to Rantanen's fit with the Carolina Hurricanes and how tough it was for Rantanen, where he wanted to be traded. He wanted to get the contract extension, where he eventually got with the Dallas Stars. So, Zach, my question to you is in twofold. The first part is, when the Hurricanes acquired Rantanen, did you have the belief that the Hurricanes were going to extend him, which they did not do? And then secondly, how difficult of a transition it was for Rantanen getting acclimated playing in Rob Brindamour's system?
I would definitely say for your first question, the Hurricanes did offer him a couple contracts, during that time he was there. And of course they know that's like, hey, we know you going through this transition period. And I think that's why they got him so early, because you did it in January. So that way you're not doing it trade deadline time. And then if you didn't feel like he was going to stay there long term, then you're kind of, well, what are you going to do now? Deadline's gone. That's why they did it so early, just in case, because this is a very big swing for the Hurricanes. But I know they did offer some extensions, even ones that were either equal to what Dallas gave him or a little bit over that too. And I think transitionally going into the system, it's very different when you look at Colorado, who's more of a run and gun type of offense where it's just go, go, go. You got your top 6, and of course you got Cale Makar, you got Nathan McKinnon, all those guys. Those guys are just full speed ahead all game, and they're logging 23 to 25 minutes a night. So you're talking big minutes for those guys. And for Mikko Rantanen, you're going to a team who looks at a little bit more of a two-way game. We were looking for a little bit more defense than what you would consider for Colorado. And that's, I mean, it takes a bit for guys to get used to that system. And that's why it's a very fit way of fitting into the Hurricanes is, do you fit the system? This is a very systematic team. And I think he was getting it over time, but then it's like you could tell, like there was just certain games where it's like he had opportunities. Like it wasn't like he was just, not trying. It's just pucks weren't going in for him, and that was just kind of how it was for the team at the time, for especially in, part of January and even most of February, even before and after the Four Nations. So I think it was, it's a little bit of an acclimation process. Plus, I mean, you talk about a guy who's been in Colorado for his entire career. I don't think he even thought about leaving Colorado. He said he wanted to stay, and we all know that whole process went down of he was calling their bluff. Colorado's like, okay, if you say you're okay with it, then fine. See, you're going to Carolina. And I think he was just like, oh, okay. So I think that was just a weird whole process that happened out. And it didn't work out in the end, but hey, I think they did a pretty good job with, getting Stankoven and the extension and all the other stuff they were able to do. So, I mean, hey, at least the Hurricanes were a team that took a swing. They tried, but at least they salvaged it and made it work out to in their favor too. Now they got guys who fit the system because both guys, Taylor Hall's part of that trade too. He got a 3-year extension, and then Logan Stankoven got an 8-year extension out of that. So it kind of worked out to where two other guys that were part of all these trades with Mikko Rantanen kind of the centerpiece worked out in the end, thankfully.
Yeah.
Well, a pretty good season last year. I know there's a lot of excitement about next season, but we got to talk about this offseason and why there's so much excitement. We'll do that next here on Locked On NHL Game Night. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're a baseball fan, you like to go under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You already follow the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? And you can get in on the game while your friends are all getting sunburned at the beach. FanDuel tracks your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with daily promotions that are fun to bet on. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether it's a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open up the FanDuel app or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we're continuing with Zack Martin. He is the host of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes. And you can maybe take your GM, Eric Tulsky, to task a little bit about the Rantanen deal as far as, maybe not knowing if he wanted to come to Carolina before making that trade. Maybe there was a lesson learned there, but a big landing as far as an offseason ad, and that was free agent forward Nikolaj Ehlers, one of the best free agents available. 6 years, $51 million, $8.5 million per season. How exciting is it for a place like the Carolina Hurricanes, who've been kind of searching for that top flight guy to be able to get Nikolaj Ehlers this offseason?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. When your nickname is Fly, you feel pretty good about yourself because if you look at his percentiles too, like his 18 to 20 mile an hour, 20 to 22 speed burst, you're talking about a guy who's in the upper 80s to upper 90 percentiles. Like that's how fast this guy is too, and especially with his shot. Even his shot mile, like his mile per hour shot totals are all in the 90s for the most part in terms of percentiles and shooting percentage and shots on goal and all that stuff too. You're talking a guy who's upper 80s to upper 90s in a lot of these areas, and that's all by NHL Edge, which shows that, hey, analytically, this guy is so good at what he does, and it's like I know NHL put out a whole package of just looking at his highlights for the last few years with the Jets, and man, he's a guy who can turn on a dime, go against 1-on-4 and score goals, hit impossible angles and stuff like that. And yeah, you feel really good about yourself for the fact that, I know the big fish was Mitch Marner. He goes before even free agency opens up. So yeah, that leaves Nikolaj Ehlers. I know there was at least like 11 or 12 teams involved that were looking at him. And he even said Hurricanes were one of the first teams to show the best interest. And they've talked about trying to get him over the last two, trade deadlines as well. So he knows that Carolina really wanted him for a long time. And he, just felt great with the fit. And that's why he left. And they even said too, that there was rumors that he even left money on the table to come to Carolina, because he loves the fit of what they do there. Plus, he said he loves the young core that we have. We look at Seth Jarvis, Logan Stankoven, Jackson Blake, Alexander Nikishin, all of these guys. And then you have the veterans of Slavin that's going to be there for a while, and Sebastian Aho. You feel really good about yourself. So now this is a guy who, wants some bigger roles and opportunities. He didn't feel like he could get that in Winnipeg. He sees Carolina possibly top line left wing for his power play unit. Like, he is going to thrive really well in Carolina. And honestly, getting him for $8.5 million for 6 years, and he's not even the highest paid guy on the team. That's still Sebastian Aho. So pretty good dealings, all things considered, for a guy who a lot of teams really wanted. And now you have, a really good winger, your top six, guy that you really wanted who can score and put up points, back-to-back 60-point seasons. 8 of his 10 years in his career, 20 goals or plus. So I think, give him the proper guys to be around and more ice time and more roles, we could definitely see 30 goals, maybe 70 points out of him next season. So there's a lot of excitement around Nikolaj Ehlers here in Carolina. There are going to be a lot of Ehlers jerseys in the stands at Lenovo Center for sure.
When it comes to the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the things that I look at that I admire from afar is their decor. Their decor took a hit this offseason. They lost Brent Burns to free agency, who signed with the Colorado Avalanche for the 1 year, $1 million contract, and Dmitry Orlov, who signed with the San Jose Sharks with a 2-year contract, $13 million. But they did acquire Kandre Miller from the New York Rangers for a second-round pick of next year's NHL draft, which is a conditional first-round pick in the 2026 or 2027 NHL draft. So my question to you in regards to Kandre Miller is, how do you foresee him being a big fit for this Carolina blue line, and as well as the type of impact that do you foresee him having in Ron Brindamour's system?
I think when you look at the trade, I know a lot of people thought maybe it was an ask because you're talking, like you said, Shu, you're looking at a conditional first, whichever one's better, of Carolina, Dallas. And of course, like you said, it's conditional because the Dallas pick is top 10 protected. So you're looking at possibly 2027, 26 second. And also they did give up Scott Morrow too, which a lot of people kind of liked, a young kid who played at UMass. But getting Kandre Miller, you're talking about a guy whose speed percentiles are in the upper 80s as well. Really good size to him as well. 110 blocks, 107 hits. This guy is probably the most physical guy in the Carolina Hurricanes, surprisingly enough. But the fact that just his long strides, there are some aspects of his game that maybe he still needs to work on a little bit. But when you have a guy like Jacob Slavin, who can lead the way in that category because he's one of the best defensemen in the league, and also your assistant coach is Tim Gleason, who was a Stanley Cup champion with the Carolina Hurricanes with Rod Brindamour. He's been there for a long time. He's just a defenseman whisperer at this point. So you kind of feel good there. And I think if you pair him with like a Jalen Chatfield, Miller and Chatty could be a fantastic second pair for the Hurricanes because both those guys have speed. They both aren't afraid to throw the body around. And I think, Miller, a lot of people think that, he didn't really even hit his ceiling with the Rangers. And they feel like with Carolina, who has taken a lot of defense and made them better, I think now you're going to see Miller go take that next step in his game. Yeah, there's some stuff you need to work on, but there's guys in that group that can definitely help and move along and stuff like that too. And you get him for 8 years at 7.5. I think that's a great AAV because the cap's going up, and you have all your defensemen under it's 7.5 or fewer in terms of money for the next, I'd say at least 7-8 years. It's like him and Slavin, both of their contracts are done at the same time. And you feel pretty good about yourselves in that aspect of you got a guy who's 25 who can only get better. And the thing too is the Hurricanes also got Brady Shea from the Rangers, and a lot of people weren't high on him. And he turned into a really good defenseman with the Hurricanes that ultimately got a 7x7 with the Nashville Predators. So there is that kind of narrative of, hey, if it doesn't work out with the Rangers, the Hurricanes are fine with taking a risk and keeping these guys and working on them a little bit.
You mentioned it briefly. Logan Stankoven was kind of the consolation prize, I guess, in the whole Mikko Rantanen situation. You were able to get a pretty good young player, locked him up for 8 years, as you mentioned, $6 million per season. And we talk about fit all the time. It's kind of one of those buzzwords, but it did appear that he's been a really good fit for Carolina. Just talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that you feel good about yourself with the Carolina Hurricanes is, it didn't work out with Rantanen, but you got 2 firsts, 2/3, and you got Stankoven in that. And then, like I said, he played 19 games with the Hurricanes in the regular season, played 15 games in the playoffs with them. He's now seen the Western and Eastern Conference Finals in his very short career in the NHL. But he and Eric Tulsky said this, like they felt when they were going to go get him, like this guy was built to be a Carolina Hurricane. And it's something about the Western Hockey League up there in Canada where they get dudes who are fantastic two-way guys who can score but also hit. He's 5'8", but he's like a bulldog. Like this guy will absolutely go after every puck, not afraid to throw fists with anyone. Like he even stood up to Tom Wilson, who's at least got a foot on him, and took care of his own business. Like he's not afraid to go up against anyone. So when you look at him, and even Seth Jarvis is 5'10", like the Hurricanes get guys who come out of the Western League who are not afraid to go up and, be physical. And I think that's when you look at Logan Stankoven. He is a Carolina Hurricane just by how he plays his 200-foot game, two-way style, and just isn't afraid to forecheck, back check, do all the stuff you need to do as well. And the thing too is I don't think a lot of people realize he did play center with the Stars last year for a little bit, and even in the Western Hockey League. So there's a guy who can be a sneaky center if you really need to, as well as a right shot. So there's a lot of dynamics to this guy's game that you can, like, they even use him as a third, unit on the PK as well, even on the second power play unit. So he's just another Swiss Army knife for the Carolina Hurricanes. When you have all these guys, they can just play pretty much almost every role in that system.
All right, we're going to look ahead coming up to what lies ahead for the Carolina Hurricanes. Can they take that next step? That's next on Locked On NHL Game Night. We are wrapping it up with the host of the Locked On, the Carolina Hurricanes. His name is Zack Martin. Zack, I'm going to throw up a little graphic here, the projected lineup for the Hurricanes next season. Tell us what you agree or maybe disagree with. But let me read it off here. You've got a top line, possibly projected of Aho, Ehlers, and Jarvis. Second line of Kotkaniemi, Stankoven, and Svechnikov. Third line of Stahl, Hall, and Blake. Fourth line of Jankowski, Martinook, and Robinson. The defensive pairings, Slavin and Chatfield, Miller and Walker, and Gosh Despair and Nikishin, with Anderson and Kochetkov as your goaltenders. Does that look fairly accurate, or are there some changes you would make with what you think the lineup will look like next season?
Obviously, for the defensive pairings, I would probably go Walker Slavin because we kind of saw that in the playoffs. I think they did really well together. Yeah, Chatfield had played with Slavin as well, but I think that better pairing would be probably Miller Chatfield, just because of the fact that, maybe they're both a little bit offensively minded, but Chatfield does have that really good breakneck speed to kind of help you out on the back check. So I think if you use Slavin, Walker, Miller, Chatfield, and then you would swap Nikish and Gostisbehere, because Ghost actually does play left and right defense. So I know on the per puck PD, they don't have him as a left, but he does play on both sides, and Nikish mainly has played left. So I kind of flip those two together, but that's my only switch up would be Walker Chatfield at least. And then forward core, the thing is they love Jordan Martinook and Jordan Stahl together, so I would say you have to keep the Jordans together. I've kind of put this out there. I would say you would probably move Kotkaniemi to the fourth left wing spot, and then move Stankoven to center, and then you would have Ehlers, Aho, Jarvis with Hall, Stankoven, Svechnikov as your top six, and then it'd be Martinook, Stahl with Blake, and then it's KK, Jankowski, Robinson. I think that'd be kind of like what I would do for the forward core. Of course, the Hurricanes, they really like, Kotkaniemi. They might go with him again just to be like, hey, we're going to run it back one more time and see if it works. If not, maybe it's a trade piece down the road. But I think that'd be kind of the switch that I would do, is try to say, hey, Stankoven's played center in the NHL. He's a right shot that they definitely need to address. Maybe put him there, and then, have Hall, Stank, and Svetch. I think it'd be a good second line overall if you want to look at it that way. And just put Kotkaniemi down on the fourth line with Jankowski, Robinson. That's what I would think they would probably do. But with Brindamour, you really never know sometimes of just how they want to do things. So I could definitely see them going back with KK again if they think that's kind of the best option possible. If they just go internally, don't look for an outside source at second center.
When you talk about the Carolina Hurricanes, you know for sure they are a top 5 legitimate Stanley Cup contender next season. And a big reason is because I felt like Jacob Slavin, prior to Four Nations, was probably the most slept on defenseman in the NHL. Keyword, slept on, meaning that people outside of Carolina did not really appreciate just how good of a defenseman Slavin is. And now, with obviously his profile having grown even larger, and with the Olympics returning next winter, next February, and Slavin guaranteed pretty much going to be a part of the U.S. Olympic team, my question to you is, can you explain to the hockey fan that's not in Carolina, that is not a Hurricanes fan, just how vital Slavin is to this team's success, and as well as just some of the intangibles that he brings forward for this team?
Yeah, and when you look at Jacob Slavin, I think I still think he's still slept on even after Four Nations, because a lot of people still don't have. They have him nowhere near the top 3 of defensemen in the league, and some people think that their other defensive defensemen are better than him, which it's still crazy when you look at it. But yeah, I think his best ability is his availability, especially on the PK. Because here's the thing, Shu. This was his third consecutive season with 8 penalty minutes or less in a whole season. If you look back at that silo season that we had, where it was just here's all your regions and stuff like that, he was a defensive game puck over the glass away from a 0 in the penalty minute category. It was just a random dog poke that got him a 2-minute penalty, and that was his one penalty the whole year. And the thing too is this past postseason, 0 penalty minutes. None. Wow. He had 8 in the regular season and in the postseason combined. And that's the thing, because it's his way of looking at just how plays break down. He puts the stick in the right place. He makes the right moves necessary to break up passes, intercept a lot of pucks, forcing guys to the outside. The thing is, he doesn't really chirp a lot. He lets his game speak for himself. And I think that's why he's so intangible, to the fact that he is a shutdown defenseman to the highest ability. And yeah, unfortunately, he's never going to win the Norris because he's not a guy who puts up a lot of points. He's a guy that is most likely your Lady Bing winners and stuff like that. And if they ever make a defensive defenseman trophy, he might win the whole thing a few times. Like, he might pull a Patrice Bergeron. He might pull a Bergeron at that point. Be like, hey, just give him the trophy regardless every year, because he's just that good. I know you appreciated that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's the thing with Slavin. It's just he's always available on the PK. That's why he's always logging the big minutes, because we saw in Eastern Conference Final, the last 2 games, he was logging 25, 26, 28 minutes, because the Hurricanes, they had 2 rookies in there because they had dealt with some injuries to Walker and Chatfield. And we don't really want to kill the rookies. So, Jacob, we're going to need you a lot more. And that's why you saw him get almost 28 minutes a night. But the thing was, he was still shutting down the Florida Panthers when he was on the ice for the most part. And he was being on the guy he needs to be. And that's why they look at him as you are the leader of our defense. You're going to be the guy who's going to help a lot of these guys get into the system and get used to it. And that's why he's going to be a Hurricane for life. That's why he signed his contract. That's 8 years, and he's 29. By the time that's done, he's going to be 36, 37. So I think that's why he's so good at what he does. And the fact that his contract is $6.4 million. He easily could have gotten 10 on the market if he went there. But he's like, no, I'll take 6.3 and some change, because he got deferred money, because he wanted to stay in Carolina. He wants the team to be built around him. And I think that speaks volumes to who he is as a player and as a person too. So it's just always being available on the ice, and just the way he plays defensively is just, he puts on a clinic of this is how, and the thing around here is Jacob Slavin doing Jacob Slavin things. Because look at that. Another broken pass, or another interception, or another, hey, he's going to throw a hit when he needs to, but he hardly gets penalties. It's very rare he gets them. That's why it's crazy when you look at a guy who's gotten 8 penalty minutes or less the last 3 seasons each, and then was a random dog poke from a 0. That's how good he is at his job.
Zack, we know what Rod Brindamour has meant to that franchise. Captain of the Stanley Cup winning team. Obviously, he's done a fantastic job as the head coach. They've been in the playoffs every year he's been there, but you had a solid year last year. I think you guys have had a really good offseason. Expectations are obviously going to be high next season. And I'm sure you must, as the host of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, hear the comments of, this guy can get us only so far, or he can't win the big one. With the offseason improvements, I wonder, is he actually on a hot seat at all? Is it, I mean, look, it's the NHL. We know how coaches come and go, but obviously he's a special guy there. I'm not suggesting he could never be let go, but I just wonder how much of, like I said, of a hot seat is Rod Brindamour on, or is he not on one at all?
Honestly, I don't think he's on a hot seat, because when you look at a guy who took a transitional team last year and won an Eastern Conference Final game where a lot of people thought they weren't even going to make it that far, or even make the playoffs, I think it speaks volumes to how good he was. And it's crazy that he got, I mean, you would think he got a couple, Jack Adams votes. He got 0 last year. And that's kind of crazy when you look at the fact that a lot of people kind of wrote off the Hurricanes before he even got into the regular season. They thought they were going to fall out to, some people thought the Devils were going to beat them, and even the Washington Capitals, which is crazy to think of. So even next year, with the expectations higher than it was last year, especially with the guys they got, I mean, there's still some question marks, like second line center position and stuff like that. How's goaltending going to hold up? Because, Frederick Anderson's got hurt every year. How is he going to, is he going to be, able to go. But I don't think he ever is, because I don't know why a team like the Hurricanes would ever want to get rid of a head coach who's gotten the 7 straight playoffs, 7 straight first round wins, when you see a lot of these other coaches who don't really have the rights. I mean, he's the fastest coach to 300 wins as well. And he's regular season wise and even the playoffs has better records than a lot. He's only our 5th head coach ever in the franchise. And that's the team that had Paul Maurice twice. And he's just found a way to win. Yeah, he hasn't gotten the cup yet, but he, for whatever reason, just makes it work every year. And I just don't see him ever being on the hot seat. He wants to be there until he probably retires. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. And I think for the Hurricanes, why would you give up a head coach like that who's consistently wins for the same 7 guys who get recycled to every other team in this league? Because that's just what this league does. I just don't see Carolina ever getting rid of this guy unless it's like 3 consecutive seasons of very subpar, way under 500 during the draft lottery. Maybe I could see that being the case, but if you're consistently winning, even with expectations super high, I just don't see Rod Brindamour ever being on a hot seat unless it gets really catastrophically like Category 5 hurricane bad, and then yes, pun intended, of how that is. That it would have to be very bad for him to be gone.
Sure, you got a final one for Zack, or are we?
Yes, I do have one final one. Like, I'm a big believer in culture in the NHL. The Boston Bruins for years, they were the standard in terms of culture. Other players wanted to come to the Bruins because of the culture. Florida has now become that standard in the NHL. Carolina is right there. You heard the comments from Nikolaj Ehlers as to why he thought Carolina was the perfect fit. Can you speak on the type of culture that Rod Brindamour has built in Carolina and why it has become so successful and as well sustainable over the duration of the last 8 years?
Yeah, no, of course. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that's something that's it starts from the top down. It's from Tom Dundon and you go from the, front office, even to Rod Brindamour. And, you hear that cliche, oh, we're a family and stuff like that. We fight for each other. The Hurricanes actually live that, and being in the locker room during scrums, you can see these guys, how much they just, enjoy being around each other and just have a lot of fun. There's a lot of guys that hang out with each other. And that's the thing that's a big culture thing. And here's this too, Shu. Oh, there's alumni who live in Carolina. They're retired guys who still live there. Cam Ward still lives there. Justin Williams, even Shane Willis, former way back in the day Hurricanes draft guy, now works for the team, and he actually works for the youth hockey programs for the Hurricanes. He runs that whole thing, and he does all the stuff with FanDuel and all that. He's been there forever. Jacob Slavin and his family, they live there full time. Like, guys live there in Raleigh full time. And I think that's something that's very big. And the fact that you look at the area too, and I like how they asked Ehlers, like, it's a quieter market. And he's like, I don't really play for, media is media. He's like, I'm fine with those guys. I want to play for the city. And you look at how Raleigh is. I look at it as it's a medium city with a small town vibe. Like, people will say, hey, how are you doing and stuff like that, but they're not going to go bother you. They're going to let you live your life. And guys love raising families there because really good school systems, just the area is really nice too. And it's very green and stuff like that. So I think you have the area plus with the culture, if you have guys being so close with each other and just being friends and hanging out and doing like barbecues and cookouts and just hanging out together and, going doing whatever off the ice and on the ice. And you see how much these guys love being together as a group. And I think that's kind of a big thing to where it's just, you fight for each other and you get 1% better every day as a group. This is a group effort. It's not one guy. It's not one line. It's a total team effort. And I think that's what Rod Brindamour was like when he played. And that's how he was as a captain. I think that's why he brought it to where it is now. And you hear guys who come in and say, I love this room. Like even Brent Burns, when he left, he said it hurt him leaving Carolina because he loved that locker room. He loved Rod Brindamour. He loved that team. And I think that's why for him, it was tough for him to leave to go to Colorado because he didn't want to leave that. And I think that speaks volumes of the fact you got alumni there and you got guys who are there who love it and guys who left said it's a special place. I love being there. I love that group and I love the fans. So I think it's just the whole camaraderie of what it's Raleigh, it's Carolina. It's just that entity of what it is down there. I think it speaks to a lot of volumes that, if you have to be there to embrace it and understand it, to be like, oh, I get it. I see why guys want to be here and embrace this family like aspect.
That is Zack Martin. He's our local expert for the Carolina Hurricanes. If you are a Caniac, you need to subscribe to Locked On Carolina Hurricanes for all the best news and opinions during the offseason. And of course, getting you ready for next season as well. Zack, appreciate it. Thank you for this, and good luck to the Hurricanes next season.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate it. Eddie, Shu, I appreciate you guys having me on. Love talking with you guys and talking hockey. So, yeah, you know where to find me if you ever need me to come on again. Love doing this, so appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Right,
it's been a blast.
We appreciate it. Thank you. And that will do it for this off-season edition of Locked On NHL Game Night. We'd love to get your thoughts if you are a Hurricane fan or what you think the Hurricanes might do this season. If you're watching on YouTube, tell us about how you feel about the Carolina Hurricanes in the comment section. Of also, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We are doing this for all 32 teams in the NHL leading up to the 2025-2026 NHL season. Looking forward to learning more from our local experts about the next NHL team we talk about. I'm Eddie Garcia. He is Shukri Wrights. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On NHL Game Night, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day.